to start. So without further ado, it's 5:45 on the dot. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Taxpayers Association of Indian River County School Board Candidate Forum. With us tonight, we have incumbent school board member Ms. Zorc and Dr. Peggy Jones, who are both running for District 3. Brian Barefoot has joined us as well, and he is running for the District 5 seat. Alec Kramer is also running for District 5 and was invited to the forum, but could not participate due to a scheduling conflict. We wish her the best. A quick reminder to those of you of who we are and what we're all about. The Taxpayers Association of Indian River County has been serving this community since 1957. Our mission is to secure those principles which allow liberty to flourish. We believe that is best accomplished by limiting government to the efficient delivery of essential services. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that does not endorse any candidates. My goal tonight is to ask intelligent questions to help us all make informed decisions when we vote in August. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jeffrey, Clerk of Circuit Court, for the customary invocation.
Thank you, Jordan. Before we go to prayer, I wanted to read from Philippians 4, verse 6. I think it's appropriate for the times we've been going through the last few months. And verse 6 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God." Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this ability to meet in this situation via technology. Thank you for the opportunity that we have to listen to the candidates. Lord, you ask us to come to you when we need you, but Lord, it's my prayer that we come to you more than just when we need you. And Lord, we need you now, though. Bless the first responders that are out there on the front lines every day, assisting everybody that's been affected by this COVID and issues. Thank our military and wherever they're at around the world. And I pray that you will give the candidates the wisdom, your wisdom, to answer the questions and to be the candidate you want them to be. These things we pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Jeff. Now, I'd like to ask the candidates to introduce themselves with a brief 2-minute opening statement. The order of those opening statements will be Dr. Jones, Mrs. Zorc, and then Mr. Barefoot. Dr. Jones, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you to the Taxpayers Association for this Zoom forum. I thought we had a great practice Friday night, and I'm glad everything is working today. I also thank you for having this forum because we are still looking at safety precautions in our county, and I hope everyone out there is safe and healthy. My husband and I raised our family here in Vero Beach, and it was a great place to raise them, mainly because, or one of the main reasons was because of our taxpayers, making sure that everyone who received taxpayers' money, they were good stewards of that money. I've been in charge of multi-million-dollar budgets as a principal and also at a nonprofit at the state level for the Florida High School Athletic Association. And I believe I have a very good understanding of the FEFP, the Finance Educational Program and funding for the state, and how that money is funded through the FTE, or the number of students that we have. And there are a lot of, I guess you could say, variations with that, but we can get into that later. I decided to run because I believe in this community, in this school district. From August through December, I met with many groups and individuals, and from there I set my 3 platforms: restoring employee trust, respecting school board policy, and regaining community respect. I'm a person who believes in school choice. In all those meetings from August through December, I met with all of the charter schools. And I know when I'm elected to this school board position, we are overseeing 17,000 public school students, but we also have oversight of our charter schools. And that's very, very important to have that connection. We're not in a one-size-fits-all for education anymore, and I understand that and respect that. I want to be part of a team that moves the school board forward in a business-like manner and focus where it needs to be on our students, teachers, schools, and community. The superintendent and the school board set the tone. I believe that's very, very important, especially with the new normal we are in and will be probably when we open our schools in the fall. And I just say, let's get back on track for our teachers, staff, and community. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mrs. Zorc, your opening statements.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Laura Zorc. I was elected to the school board in 2016. I'm currently serving my second year as your school board chair. In my first 90 days, I did ask the former superintendent for his resignation because I felt that it was overdue. We had a lack of leadership and mismanagement going on in the district. Since then, I've led the board through recruiting and hiring a dynamic superintendent, Dr. David Moore. The district is now on a transformational path, and with transformational change is occurring. My reelection, I'm being supported by local leaders who understand the magnitude of all my accomplishments in such a short amount of time. Among those are charter pioneer leaders like Jean Waddell and Carl Zimmerman, education literacy leaders like Ray Oglethorpe and former taxpayer board chair Charlie Searcy, just to name a few. I feel that I'm the most qualified for this position because of my background in operations management of a large corporation. I have had the critical experience that we've needed over the last few years to understand that a well-functioning school board requires sound management and financial decision-making. Not only do I have the background in operations and management, but I am the parent voice on the board. I have 4 children. My oldest is 28. I've had a child in school for 22 years. Can you imagine that? It's hard to believe, but my oldest daughter graduated Vero Beach High School in 2011. I have 2 that are currently at Vero Beach High School in band, cheer, all the extras that you can imagine. And my son Chandler is starting middle school this year. I also have 2 grandchildren that I'm very actively involved in helping them with their education, and they're here in our elementary school. So I was the former PTA president for the county. I represent the parents. I was put on Governor Scott's Education Advisory Committee because I was so involved and I was such an active, outspoken parent that he did put me on his education committee as his liaison to the parents.
Thank you, Mrs. Zorc. But I would ask everyone to keep an eye on the chat box at the bottom. Val will be notifying us that we were at about 2.5 minutes there for your opening statements.
Okay, so it's down in the bottom, you said?
Yep, and I apologize. That was housekeeping on my part, but just keep an eye on that. That's how we'll notify anyone if they're getting close or over their allotted time.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, in the chat. Thank you. And Mr. Barefoot, your 2-minute opening statements, please.
Thank you. I've been around the Vero Beach area since 1971. My parents bought a home on the Barrier Island back then. Started coming here, visiting my folks, my children. My wife's mother and stepfather bought a home here in the mid-'80s, so we're sort of double legacies and have been around this area for a long time. I spent 33 years in financial services and senior management positions at both Merrill Lynch and Payne Weber. Was responsible for billions of dollars of their risk, their balance sheets on a global basis. I have had a lot of experience on various boards, Blue Cross Blue Shield being one where I was the finance chair or the audit chair for all of my 11 years. This is Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, and continue to serve, and that's a $16 billion enterprise, continue to serve as on their investment committee. We oversee a $4.5 to $5 billion portfolio, depending on where the markets are at any point in time. I have spent a lot of time in education, probably in the aggregate over 40 years, on the board of an independent school, K through 12 girls school in New Jersey, where my older daughter went. I'm currently on the board of a public high school in Vermont. There's a lot of private support for that high school. Vermont is a very poor state, and some of the demographics in Vermont are not dissimilar from what we face here in Indian River County. As far as Babson College is concerned, I was a graduate. I went on that board in 1985. I was chairman of the board from 96 to 2001. I became an interim president, I thought, bridging the gap while we continued to search. 9/11 happened. The whole world on the East Coast sort of fell apart, if not actually emotionally, and I ended up staying for 7 years. But as I like to say, we're all interim in everything we do, as long as we do. So as far as here, I've been vice chair of the hospital foundation, before Indian River Medical Center, now Cleveland Clinic, for 9-10 years. And I'll just wrap it up there.
Okay, thank you very much. Does everybody see the chat feature to be able to keep an eye on the clock? And we'll try to give about a minute warning, 30 seconds, and then ask you to wrap it up as we're exceeding that 2-minute time. And I will be allowing 2 minutes for response to each of the questions. The first question will be answered in the order, Mr. Barefoot, you'll go first, followed by Dr. Jones and Ms. Zorc. The first question is this: considerable time, money, and effort is spent negotiating with the CWA and teachers union. Do you believe that unions are an asset or a liability in the mission of educating our students? Please explain your position.
At the end of the day, it boils down to the people involved. To label a union good, bad, or indifferent, I think probably does a disservice. Teachers are critical. Obviously, you have no school system without teachers. If they organize themselves around a union, that's great. We have a union at the high school in Vermont. We have a terrific relationship with them between the head of school, the board, and the union. We're all in this together, and it's all focused on the kids. If you have the wrong leadership in either representing, in this case, the county or the union, then you're going to have problems. If you have leadership that's on the same page, then it becomes, you won't even know there's a union there. The unions serve their purpose. They protect the employees. I have no problem with that. But the goal is to get everybody on the same page, focused in the right direction. If they get off track, whether it's the administration's fault or the union's fault, then we have a problem.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Jones, your thoughts on the matter?
Yes, sir. I've been on both sides, as a teacher negotiating and as district staff negotiating. And in my meetings from August through December, I met with the CWA in a group meeting, and then of course Liz Cannon at that time, who was the president. At this point, it is something that we just have to work together on. It can't be us and them. It can't be we and they. It's just something we need to come together on. Now, I'm sure you understand, we didn't have a contract for about 2 years. I was in that meeting that night, and I had to switch to the ESE Parent Advisory, where they were finally getting a contract. And during that time, a lot of money was spent on other things when our teachers didn't even have a contract. The CWA will say, let us be part of the team. Let us work together. The teachers, the same thing. It's a district, it's a CWA, it's the teachers. As far as them being a plus or a minus or neutral, if you're not hearing anything from anybody, then that's a plus. Because if we do not get teachers in this county to stay, then we've got a problem. The impact on a child's education is crucial from that direct instruction in the classroom. You know, we talk about this. If you look at where we are in Indian River County, as far as the poverty population and the ALICE population, the working poor, you know, we're struggling. And some of our single teachers, and I'm glad the governor just got our raises there for our beginning teachers, but you know, they struggle. It is something where we have to show them that they are part of our community and the impact that they have in our classroom. I've seen too many times where they'll say, well, you know, we can't do this, we can't do that. Yeah, we can. We can come together and get it working. And again, It was ridiculous that we didn't have a contract for about 2 years, and we need to move forward from that. Those teachers union, CWA support, it could be a team effort, and it could be a win-win for every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mrs. Zorc.
Thank you, Jordan. The CWA represents about 750 of our support staff, and then the IRCEA represents about 1,150 of our teachers. I guess it depends if the unions and the board haven't always agreed, and we're not always going to agree. But what I think that is the most important is that we respect each other, and we work through the issues, and we try to get to the ultimate goal, and that's to provide a high quality education for our students. In the meantime, we need to be respecting our employees while creating a budget that puts our students first. My job is to support the superintendent to prevent costly turnover. I need to be mindful of the morale, and I need to support hiring and recruiting the best of the best, all while trying to balance a $3 million budget and not put the district in a financial situation that we can't afford the contracts years to come. The unions right now, yes, in the past there was a relationship there. There was a chip on the shoulder of the former superintendent, but as Dr. Jones had mentioned, within a short amount of time with our new superintendent coming on board, he has been able to mend those relationships, and that's what we want to see going forward, is that respect and support of each other.
Excellent. Thank you. The next question will be answered in the order of Mrs. Zorc, you first, Mr. Barefoot, followed by Dr. Jones. Mrs. Zorc, do you support the 0.5 discretionary operating ad valorem millage that our taxpayers will vote on in August? Why or why not? If elected, what steps will you implement to ensure that the district can operate within budget and not require additional funds from our taxpayers every 4 years or so?
The 0.5 millage was something that the entire board and the superintendent have recognized that we needed going forward. This is something that the board is not dictating that that we're mandating the taxpayers. It's actually going out for a vote. So the taxpayers will actually have the discretion to say, yes, we support it and we don't support it. The three areas that we're looking at with that millage that we've identified that this district is in critical need of is innovation in our classrooms. We are lost in the past. In order to offer a world-class education, we have to have those funds to be able to put our classrooms up into those areas of innovation. Another area that we're seeing, we're losing teachers from South County to North County because the neighboring counties have all passed referendums to increase the wages of their teachers. So all our we're seeing teachers spread out to those other counties, and we have to get competitive because in order to offer quality education, we have to have the best of the best, like I said, in the classroom. And then, you know, this is something that we need to work on with the new superintendent going forward with the new CFO, is not to have to keep going out year after year. And the items that we're asking for on this millage is not the same that were asked by the previous board and by the previous superintendent. These are new areas that we've identified, and it's up to the taxpayers if they want to support it or not. And that's where we are right now.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Mr. Barefoot.
I'm muted.
Oh, and you are on mute currently.
In all of my years professionally as president of Babson College, I know one thing for sure: if you give somebody more money, they'll find a way to spend it. And so, having said that, that doesn't mean that you don't give them money when the reasons are for the right reasons. In this particular case, I'm a bit of a disadvantage because I haven't been involved in the budget, how it's been spent. I'm aware that obviously that they would like to have this roughly $9 million, and they would like to know ahead of time whether or not they're going to have use of it as they put together plans for the future. But I would argue that in the world we're in now, no one knows what the finances of the state or the county are going to look like 6 months from now. There's a lot of uncertainty. And I would hope that within the framework, now that it's been approved by the county commissioners, now that it's been agreed upon to be on the August 18th primary ballot, if the taxpayers approve it, and the world's changed and everybody's financial situation has changed and they may or may not approve it. But if they do, that doesn't mean that money has to be spent just because they have it. And I think it's the responsibility of the school board to make sure to provide oversight, not to micromanage, but to provide oversight and make sure on a priority basis that money is spent intelligently, and hopefully there'll be some money left over for a rainy day.
Okay, thank you very much. And Dr. Jones.
Thank you. Yes, I'm for the 0.5 millage, but one thing I think our county has to know is where was it spent 2016 to 2020? When people look at the website, they may see a lot of pages saying this, this, and this, but I think something like a pie chart can really satisfy a lot of people as to where that money was spent. Instructional technology, teacher raises, maybe went into safe schools at that time. And I know the new superintendent is looking at a few new things, but this county has been very, very good to our schools. That vote was a 65% approval last time. So let's show them the respect and show them what we have spent that on. Now, I did talk with Dr. Moore today, and I've talked with Mr. Fagan. At the one time I talked to him, we had not received the governor's budget. He is expecting around 134 million, which makes sense because when I visited the tax collector last fall, we were at 124 million in 2017, 131 million in 2019. So about 134 million is about right. And I agree as we move forward, can we then start seeing where we could spend this out of our own allocation? Right now, we're using a lot of our capital money to pay back our debt. That could be used for technology. It's just something we really, really have to look at all parts of the picture when we look at our budget. Again, with the community, even though it's an existing millage, and we understand that it's tough times. Somebody may say, I could use that extra $100 a month. But I know they support our schools, but we must let them know exactly where we spent it 2016 to 2020. I'm not saying every line item, but a pie chart. Where was it spent? And I think parents and community will feel a little bit more comfortable. I'm for it. It can help our teachers and our students and our schools. We're going into an unknown this year. We're not sure exactly what all the categorical and mandates will be. We've got the CARES money coming in, but let's just use our money wisely and tell our taxpayers how we use it. Thank you.
Thank you. The answer order on the next question will be Dr. Jones coming up first, Mrs. Zorc, followed by Mr. Barefoot. Unfortunately, legal costs are a considerable expense for our district. Do you or do you not support continuing to utilize the services of the current outside general counsel? Why or why not? And what measures are you willing to take to reduce our legal expenses moving forward?
I'm not sure at this time about that. I've been looking. I'm not sure how many have applied for this, but I do know we have spent a lot of money, and not just on our general counsel. $80,000 in a charter school lawsuit, $750,000 in a DSEC plan, thousands of dollars on personnel issues that go to attorneys. So I would take a look at it, see what is being spent across the state. You know, personally, I'd love to have somebody locally to see where we could go with this, but it's just not our school board attorney in the money. If you look at the fees, and I've done some requests on this, it's just way too much money out there. Again, $750,000 on a DSEC plan. I've talked to Tony Brown, the NAACP. They had to stop fighting because of the lawyer cost. $80,000 on charter schools. I talked with one business manager there. They were in that room. The school board was in the other room, whoever was there, and the attorney representing them. They even looked at mediation, said no. So the charter schools got what they should have in the first place, 12%. Plus, we had to pay interest. Way too much money being spent. As far as our attorney, I just had to keep looking at it, look at the expenditures. I saw that a couple people had applied. I don't know if there's been any interviewing, but I would take a close look at it as to whether we would move forward with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And your thoughts on that, Mrs. Zorc?
Thank you, Jordan, for that question. That has been one of the areas that I've been in the very beginning that was a red flag to me, and I actually brought it to the board several times. The first budget cycle, I brought up the amount that we were paying for our legal fees, and I felt that that was an area when we're looking at our budget, when we're have all the constraints that we have, that dollars should not be going into courtrooms, they should be going into classrooms. I had brought it to the board then for us to look at going out for an RFP, RFQ, letter of interest, whatever you wanted to call it, to really analyze what we were paying for our board attorney, because we were paying her $22,000 a month. That to me is overinflated in those numbers, and I've been pushing for that. So we actually we've sent out for letters of interest. That's something that I want to have accomplished over the next few months to get those legal fees down. But I have a chart here on legal fees. When I got on the board, yes, Dr. Jones is correct that there was a lawsuit with NAACP. There was a lawsuit with the charter schools. Our superintendent was going crazy with employee investigations. Those were all the areas when I got on the board that I went after and I tackled, and I took a look at those. Over the last few years and this past year as the board chair and as a school board member, we had the all-time low. You'll see the graph here at the lowest in 4 years was under my leadership as board chair. So that's something that I want to continue to analyze, because I think those dollars are exact dollars that we don't need to be spending, and those are the dollars we need to be putting in our classrooms.
Thank you, Ms. Zorc. And Mr. Barefoot.
Well, if it was at all possible, I would want the school board to have an employed general counsel. As soon as you start, and I've had a lot of experience with this, as soon as you start outsourcing legal advice, there's almost no end to how much it could end up costing. I know that we've had the school board's had a requisition out there. Didn't get much of a response early on. I think it's back out in the marketplace. Laura could correct me if I'm wrong. You want a general counsel that's a part of the management team, that's invested with you in making management decisions, that is going to shepherd the district's dollars, and if it's necessary to go outside for some specialty, if it's human resource related, whatever it might be, you can always do that, but you've got your general counsel managing that budget. The way it is now, yes, there's a monthly retainer that Mrs. Diagresta gets, but some of these other expenses that Dr. Jones and Mrs. Zorc just outlined, I mean, I can't sit here and second guess them, but to pay $750,000 and have nothing to show for it is really egregious. Now, my guess is had we had a general counsel managing that outsourcing project, we would have either had a result or a lot less money spent, or both. So the first way to attack this, instead of just spending money willy-nilly, is it will be money well spent if we can recruit a full-time employee as general counsel.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Barefoot. You'll be up first on the next question, followed by Dr. Jones and Ms. Zorc. The question is this: do you support the expanded Aaron Feast Guardian program, and will you work with our sheriff to develop and implement a Guardian program that improves the safety of our students and fits the culture of our community? Why or why not?
You know, this is a very complicated question, and every school district, every college, I had to live with this, not in today, but a few years back. Do you have civilians, in this case, faculty, teachers, staff, custodians, complementing or supplementing the police that are already in these schools? There's a lot of people that are very uncomfortable with that, and there's some people that support it. One of the benefits of having those folks is the bad guy, so to speak, doesn't know who might be backing up the policeman at the door. But it also makes people very nervous. I don't know what the right answer is, right or wrong. But what I do know is that if you don't get the principals and some of the senior teachers together and see if we can't reach consensus on this thing, this is not something that should be mandated by the superintendent, and it sure as hell shouldn't be mandated by a school board. They're probably the least qualified of all because they're not really in the fray. Leave it to law enforcement, leave it to the sheriff's office. Sebastian and Vero Beach all have great relationships with the district. They split the cost of these law enforcement officials, the SROs that are in each of the schools. And if you're going to supplement that from volunteers that are qualified, trained, and all of the things that go with it, I guess I'm okay with that, but not without the support of the leadership within the individual schools feeling that they can manage it and that the people chosen are responsible.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Dr. Jones.
I'm a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 1, and I became a high school principal 6 months before Columbine, and my life changed as a mom and as a principal. Talked with many teachers regarding this program, and I certainly understand what it's like on a high school campus if there's any kind of issue like that that would go on. You know, even when you have to practice the code red drills. I was at Felsmer Elementary this spring helping when the principal was out for a while, and the SRO there was practicing with the kindergarten students a code red drill and being quiet. And it's a really, really tough thing to see, especially with children that young. Teachers went to school to teach. I would certainly be supportive of a program working with the sheriff, police department, Felsmer, Sebastian, Vero Beach, where we could get extra security on campus. I mean, I'm telling you, at a high school principalship, I've talked with this about with some high school teachers. You know, these people are supposed to be packing and not, you know, having it shown or anything. The kids would know. It's just something that we have to talk about as a community. Our teachers, our administrators, our parents, our sheriff department, and our police department. Vast majority of teachers said, no, absolutely not. They don't want this. So if we do anything to help with the situation, we've got to just maybe get some more help with our security from our sheriff and our police and Felsmer and so forth. Again, I know this is all budget. I know this is all budget, but when you look at the budget all together, let's prioritize for the safety of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mrs. Zorc.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. As a parent of 3 that's currently in the public school system and 2 grandchildren, safety to me is number 1. I know it's supposed to be education, but if our kids aren't safe, then what do we have? Setting in these closed session meetings, I can't go into detail out of confidentiality, but I am going to say that this board has been open in taking the recommendations from our sheriff, from our chief of police, Curry, and from our chief of police, Morrison, at the time, who was they're in our schools every single day. We have an excellent partnership. We pick up half of the cost and they pick up a half of the cost. They are strongly against this. And at this point, as a school board, we're taking the recommendation. But I am going to tell you, if I was in one of those little districts that did not have that partnership and did not have the funds to have that actual trained law enforcement in our schools, I would probably, in those little districts, I would be one of those parents that said, yes, let's talk about having these armed individuals within the school, because we know the bad guy has the gun. And so I would be for it if it was in that situation, but we're not in that situation here in Indian River County. We have an excellent program. We have an excellent plan in partnership with our law enforcement.
Okay. Thank you very much. The order on the next question, answering order, will be Dr. Jones, followed by Ms. Zorc and Mr. Barefoot. The question is, there have been discussions that school districts need to anticipate a cut in funding for the 2021-2022 school year. If funding is down, what specific areas within the budget are you willing to cut? What strategies would you implement to reduce expenses? Dr. Jones.
Good question. I'm glad we have the millage this year, and hopefully it will pass for the next 4 years, but we shall see. I don't know anything that would be cut. And again, I've looked at the budget this year and what Dr. Moore just did. You want to stay away from instruction in the classroom. That's number one. But we keep, ever since I've been in public education, it's continually a cut, and certain years have more cuts than others. But you want to keep the teacher in the classroom. You want to do your best at keeping the students safe and having enough security and administrators there to help with the situation. I'd certainly like to get that debt down so we could use that money to be proactive and use capital outlay money for technology and safety instead of paying off debt. So that would be one major thing that I would like to do. And then continue to move forward to see what is the best thing that can help our students. We still have a huge achievement gap with our white students and our Black students, 3rd through 10th grade, language, arts, and math. It's about a 30% gap. We've got to do something about that. So no matter what we do, we've got to keep the instructors in the classroom and take a look at the outside parameters. I was at the district office for a year. I much rather cut something at the district office than the school because I've seen how both areas work. And I think district office people feel that way too. Keep it in our classrooms and do anything but cut the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mrs. Zorc.
Thank you. This is something that I've been paying very close attention to because it is estimated between 10 and 20% that our budget's projected to be reduced next year by the state. So this year as a board member, I'm already starting to look at those areas because we don't want all the impact at one time next year. We've already identified 3.9 million in savings that we can look at this year, and we're looking at there are some positions that might have been critical 5 years ago, but are they really making an impact in the classroom today? So we have some savings that we're cutting there. Also, we're looking at our non-discretionary funds. We've found quite a bit of funds there that we had allocated previously, but they're not making the impact today. Another area that I will continue to hammer on that's our legal fees. With our new superintendent and our new chief financial officer, we're going to continue to look at reorganization and restructure. How can we become more efficient and also have a better outcome? But another key part of this question we need to look at is not just look at what are we going to cut, but what are those partnerships that we're going to develop? We need to develop stronger partnerships within the community so that we can go out to these nonprofits and say, look, we have a need here and we have a need there, and then they can help us. One thing as a board member that I had brought forward a couple years ago is during the downturn of the economy, they cut the grant writer out of the district. That makes absolutely no sense to me. So this past restructuring and reorganizing, we have an individual that's going to be working on grants, and that person's going to be key in helping us bring funds into the district during a time that our money is being taken away.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I'll invite Ms. Zorc and Dr. Jones to exchange the questions that they have prepared for one another.
Do I get a chance to answer?
I hadn't considered that. Sure, Brian, I'll give you the option to answer the question as well.
You don't want me to answer the question on the budget?
Oh, my apologies. My apologies. I jumped ahead. My apologies. Yes, please, please go ahead and answer, Brian.
Well, it's because there's one thing I know how to do. It's manage a budget in crisis times. I can tell you that. When you grow up in the world of finance, particularly, the Wall Street world, the lights go off quickly. They don't just dim and then ultimately go off. They go off quickly. And if you're not prepared to act quickly, you're going to have a problem. Perfect example. I get to Babson. 9/11 happens. 50% of our exec ed business gone because it came from overseas. The endowment gets clobbered. All of a sudden, you've got to put in place a process to evaluate every aspect, almost a zero-based budget. People are your biggest expense, whether it's their salary, their benefits, and you go from there. I think the key to managing a budget is the process, particularly in difficult times, which we are going to be in. We just don't know how tough, and as long as all the constituents representing have a seat at the table, the process will produce an outcome. Now, you may not be able to reach consensus, and that's what the superintendent and ultimately the board gets paid for, is to make that final decision. But the process is key, and you got to set priorities. Now, for example, at Babson, when I was there, I said, you will not eliminate $1 that will take away from the student experience, the undergraduate student experience. There are plenty other things. And you know what happens in education? Everybody's got a great idea, and about every 5, 6, 7 years, some initiative gets started. There's people and costs associated with that initiative. 5, 6, 7, 8 years later, it's totally irrelevant, but the costs are still around. I guarantee you that you look at a $300 million budget today, and I'm just going to pick a number out of thin air, that with a little bit of education, I could find at least 10% of that budget that might be nice to have, but it's totally, if it were missed, it would not impact the in the classroom experience, nor taking anything away from the teachers, which along with the kids are where the priorities need to be. So I think I'm well prepared to deal with anything that has to do with budgets, the need to cut. And I'm not particularly excited about finding new ways to spend money, because I said earlier, anybody can spend money. It's spending it intelligently that is really the key.
Thank you, Mr. Barefoot, and I apologize for the oversight. It's my first forum, so I appreciate you all going easy on me. So now at this time, I'll invite Mrs. Zorc and Dr. Jones to exchange their questions that they have prepared for one another. And Ms. Zorc, I'll give you the honor of asking your question first.
Okay. All right, so I prepared it, so bear with me. Prior to the resignation of former superintendent, the district was facing many issues, including the walkout of the majority of the finance department, the lack of a chief financial officer for almost a year, still left with the board's responsibility of approving a $3 million budget for 2019 and 20. During that time of receiving the former superintendent's resignation, Dr. Jones, you had worked individually on the sidelines with one board member to persuade the board to hire you as the interim superintendent without us conducting a search. As a principal, not having these experiences, looking back, do you think the board made the right decision by hiring Dr. Moxley instead of hiring you?
Well, that's a good question, Mrs. Zorc, but you are incorrect. Ms. Berenborg did call me about that, and I told her I would consider it. But let's go back to the real issue here. You called me about the interim superintendent position, and I have that on my cell phone. And the first question you asked me was, can you make a tough decision? I about dropped the phone. Yes, I can make a tough decision. I make 10 of them going across the courtyard when I was a principal of the high school. The second thing is, you said, teacher morale is just awful right now. How are you with teacher morale? Well, as a teacher, as a dean, as an assistant principal, as a principal, I felt privileged to work with these people in this district and also in Illinois. And I would say, and most people would say who would work with me. Now, understand, I was an administrator for 25 years. I didn't make everybody happy all the time, but they would say that there was respect on both sides. And then, Mrs. Zorc, you told me who needed to be fired. And with that, I said, I don't know anything about the situation. See, Mrs. Zorc, you don't know your role or responsibility of a school board member. Your role and responsibility is to guide the superintendent and hold him accountable. Guide the superintendent and hold him accountable. So your phone call to me was unprofessional. Now, let's get to the situation with the interim superintendent. I did apply. I did not get an interview. And this is a public record. I sent an email to the FSBA. When I didn't get the interview, I wasn't upset about getting the interview. I was upset that neither you nor any other school board member, when the facilitator of that interim superintendent deciding on who you were going to interview, said, so we're just going to interview those with superintendent experience. Mrs. Zorc, you and the school board members broke the law. You did not post it like that. So your question is whether I would do better than Miss Moxley? I don't know. I heard she was a great lady. I know for the year that she was in there, I could have done a very good job. I know this community. And when you spoke at the very beginning who supported you, look at my campaign donations from $10 to $25 to $100. I don't have those $1,000 pocket, donations come in like that. I'm working with all pockets of this community. I'm not staying in one little group saying, okay, well, this is how we're going to do it. People know me from Fellsmere, from Sebastian, from Obasso, in Vero Beach, in Gifford. I've worked with those communities. So your question on whether I would be better, I don't know. Miss Moxley was a great lady. Do I think I could have done it for the 6 months to the year? You bet. But even more so, you know what's ironic? These are on email and on phone calls. Several calls when it came up for permanent superintendent, because my name was mentioned by surveys, my name was mentioned by groups. So I felt very good about that. But no, I didn't apply. I don't have the strength to be someone there for 5 years. That kind of systemic leadership, takes 3 to 5 years. I've already put in many, many years for this community, for education, and for this district. So your question was one that says, am I going to be better than this lady? I don't know. I just know I would have done a good job, and I know Dr. Moxley did a good job. But I wanted everybody to hear what the whole situation was.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. I apologize, we did not have the timer running. In lieu of that, I think it's appropriate to give Ms. Zorc 2 minutes to respond. There's certainly an issue that is being aired out. Ms. Zorc, would you care to respond, or should we move on to the next question?
No, I just think I'm very disappointed in Dr. Jones's reply because she just over-exaggerated the truth.
Not a bit.
I did not call her until after it was made as a recommendation where she was working with the other board member for her to.
Not a bit, not true. She
You-
recommended me, I said you could mention my name at the meeting. That is it. It was an honor.
It's my turn. Sorry, Dr. Jones. But I did call Dr. Jones to see if she was interested in the position. And the reason I asked this question is because Dr. Jones was very outspoken in the community and disappointed that she did not get an interview. And I was hoping to hear that she did say that Dr. Moxley was more qualified, but I did not hear that.
I said she did a good job. She did an excellent job. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you both. I think at this point we'll move on to Dr. Jones. I'm sure you have a question prepared for Ms. Zorc.
Yeah, we went a little bit through how much money is being spent that should be in the classroom. And Mrs. Zorc has been the chair since 2018 and 2020. But when we ended the 1890 fund balance, we were at 11%. And the budget forecast for the 1920 ending fund balance is about 5%. So we spent a lot of money here. What can you tell me about why we're losing that kind of money and why it's not going into the classroom to make sure that we're getting what we need for our kids?
Thank you for that
11%
question.
to 5%.
Thank you for that question. That is exactly why I asked the former superintendent for his resignation. As I said in the very beginning, the decisions that we make as a board member today, those decisions will follow us. I have had to, on my time on the board, I had been a part of resolving the lawsuit that was started with the charter schools, and we had a large settlement that we've been paying out year after year. When I got on the board, we also had a large amount that the board had to take out of the fund balance to put into the insurance to cover that fund balance. And like Dr. Jones had mentioned, we had a lot of legal fees that the board was paying out. We had the former superintendent who was doing multiple investigations. So yes, those were the areas that I was bringing up a couple of years ago and saw this is where we're heading. And that is exactly why I asked for the former superintendent's resignation.
May I respond, Jordan? Yeah.
Yep, I'll give you an opportunity to respond.
Thank you so much. You really didn't answer my questions on the fund balance, but the superintendent takes direction from the board.
Yes, I did answer it.
If the superintendent takes direction from the board, it's a 5-person board. You keep saying I. That's a 5-person board. And when you look at all of this and you look at the consensus building, with which there is none, the leadership, which there is none, and the facilitation to move us forward in a business-like manner, we're not getting the answers to the questions that we have. So the one thing I want everybody to understand is the superintendent takes direction from the 5-person board and then holds him or her accountable. And no, I did not get an answer to that.
When you're a board member and you have a 2 to 3 vote and the consensus of the board is to go along and rubber stamp what the superintendent says, as you just said, Dr. Jones, you cannot force the hand of the superintendent. It takes consensus. And
Right.
at the time, until the new board that we currently have, it was everything that we had come across was rubber stamped by a consensus of 3.
And many people have said that in the community, way too many personal agendas and dysfunction. So that's fine.
Well, if there's a personal agenda, I see that you do have one.
I see that you do too, Mrs. Zorc. Thank you.
Well, then it's mutual then.
I see that we all have a lot of passion for this, and we should look at that as a good thing. We haven't heard from Mr. Barefoot in a while, so I'd like to start the next question by giving him the lead and the opportunity to answer first. Mr. Barefoot, the governor is raising starting teacher salary to $47,500. Do you believe that the district needs to raise veteran teacher salaries? If yes, at what rate, and how do you plan to accomplish that within the budget?
This question came up the other day, and I answered then by saying there isn't a business that I'm aware of that doesn't have salary compression. It happens all the time. This is a particularly challenging one because you've got to bring all the teachers up to 47.5. I don't know how many teachers that have been here that fall between the current minimum and 47.5, but it's a substantial amount of money. And then what about the teachers that have been here for several years, making 48,000, 50,000, 51, and all of a sudden the rookies, so to speak, are right on top of them. This requires great skill and diplomacy, and maybe diplomacy and skill in that order. And this is where managing this budget, you got to, it's probably as important a place to start as any. And going back to managing a budget, there got to be some things that you can apply, eliminate, so that you can work something out over a period of time for the veteran teachers, the teachers that are going to find all of these newly hires or the ones that have only been there a year or two on top of them in terms of salary. It's a classic management problem. If you've had management experience, if you've had managing a budget, you will know how to deal with this. Communication is the key. You can't just hand somebody a check. You got to explain to them the situations and work with them and make a commitment, and then follow through on your commitment that you will try and make up whatever adjustments need to be made. If it can't be done this year, it can be accomplished over a period of 2 or 3 years. And by the way, this is where a relationship with the union leadership can be really helpful. Convince them, get them on your side, and help them be an advocate for the process that you're trying to manage, recognizing that it is a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Barefoot. Dr. Jones.
Is it the same question as Brian? I'm sorry.
Yes, same question as Brian.
Okay, will you say it one more time, Jordan? I'm sorry.
Of course, no problem. The governor is raising starting teacher salary to $47,500. Do you believe that the district needs to raise veteran teacher salaries? If yes, at what rate, and how do you plan to accomplish that within the budget?
Well, and again, I talked to Dr. Moore, and I've talked to Mr. Fagan and Scott Bass. He did say we were saving $1 million with our reallocations and our new SAM model and changing some positions in Title II and Title III and so forth. But I'm very glad the beginning teacher salary is where it is. We're now going up to, I think, about 6th in the nation. And it's the only way we're going to keep our teachers here. You know, Vero Beach rent is around $1,600 a month for 2-bedroom, and average home is $228,000 a month. So we've got to make sure they can support themselves here. Now, the 500 million, 400 million will be for the beginning teachers, and then 100 million in the state to help us, you know, with the rest of the scale. And I know that's very, very important. At one time, they were saying even maybe that would be a bonus situation for those teachers. I don't like the bonus situation for veteran teachers, but we want to do our best to make sure we're just kind of being equal in these steps. Again, if it goes back to budget, you know, one of the things we can do is start paying off our debt, making sure our fund balance is a little bit better at the end of the year than it is, and just moving forward to make sure that everyone is as equal as possible with those steps. So I would look hard to do that.
Thank you. And Mrs. Zorc.
Thank you, Jordan. One of the initiatives of our Governor DeSantis was he wanted to pay fair wages to our teachers because we are 46th in the state. I believe the budget that he proposed this year in raising the wages to $47.5 for our new recruits and our new hires, that's the first step. The next step is we have to lobby and legislate so that we can also get the state funding to increase and have the funds to be able to have fair wage equitable across the board for all our teachers. And that's where it's important to be a good legislator and someone that knows how to lobby for these things. As the legislative liaison, I was able to work on many initiatives and was very successful in being able to move items forward. So I think it's important. We're district, all school districts are tight on cash, so it's really going to be up to us to hold the legislation accountable and ask the governor to continue his mission of successfully funding all the teaching positions.
Thank you very much. I have one last question before we move on to closing statements. Ms. Zorc, you'll be first on the last question, followed by Mr. Barefoot and Dr. Jones. Do you believe in the fundamental and absolute rights and responsibilities of parents to raise their children and direct their health care and education? If yes, what have you done or will you do to protect those rights as a school board member? And if that answer is no, please explain.
Yes, I think that as a parent of 4, I think that I should be able to decide what educational setting fits my child and the best needs for their learning style. I've been a very strong proponent of school choice. Not only have I been a proponent for charter schools, my kids actually went to a charter school for 7 years. I also believe if we have an educational system that's not fitting the needs of that individual student, I believe that the scholarship program that the state has is very beneficial for those students to be able to go outside the public school system. So that's another area that I believe in supporting parents and parent rights. An area that I've been very actively and outspoken on is also not only with our charter schools, but we also should have school choice within our school district. And so I've always been one of those parents. Our magnet schools are so successful. Why don't we have more programs within our schools like our magnet programs? Because one of the objectives of school choice is that there's not enough of it. And so I've been a huge proponent on making sure that we develop and we incorporate more magnet programs and options within our school district. And that's something that we're going to see coming forward over the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Barefoot.
Well, if you grew up in my house, there was no question who was in charge. It was my father. And I got in enough trouble as a kid that I'm not sure I had a choice. He told me to straighten up but to bring it forward to today, absolutely. Every child's different. I have, besides 3 children, I have 6 grandchildren, a couple of whom are dyslexic. My older daughter's husband was dyslexic, and he's a brilliant doctor. He just learns differently. Two of their girls are dyslexic. They were very careful, and they watched how they managed this with their children, found the right environment for them where they could gain the confidence necessary in order to go on and lead a normal, if not highly successful life. So absolutely, when it comes to education and health, parents, they're there to guide their children. They should have a lot of say, and the district should provide as many options as they can afford. You can't afford to be all things to all people all the time. We've got 27 schools, and I mean, in the high school that I'm involved with in Vermont, we have 24 special ed teachers in a high school of 900 kids. I mean, in the number of students that they work with and the various challenges that those kids face, and they are many, it's expensive. But we should make every opportunity to give parents and their children all the choices possibly available to them. And as Mrs. Zorc mentioned, the Florida Scholarship Program is a great way. If there's not something here in Indian River County, hopefully there's something somewhere else in the state that child can and their parents can find for them.
Okay, thank you very much. And Dr. Jones.
I'm for every school where a child is successful, whether you're being homeschooled, virtual school, private school, public charter school, anywhere a child is successful. And the parent has the right to put that child there. I believe in the voucher system that we've been using, and I know some of the students use it even here to go to private schools in this county. I think it's very important that we understand in the public schools, because when elected to the school board, we're dealing with the 17,000 students. Each school has to have a draw, and I understand that. We're already having some issues with some school populations getting low, or higher African-American rate in certain schools, and we really need to do a lot about that. So we need to really make sure that all of our schools have a draw and that students can be successful day in and day out. When school advisory started, early 90s, I remember as a principal, some people were saying, oh, all our parents were getting involved and what will happen? Well, I welcomed it. I welcomed our parents. I wanted to listen to them. I wanted to understand them. That's an asset to us. We know that when they come in and we listen and we talk and we create a plan together that's successful for our students, it's going to be the key to success. I mean, what's our desirable outcome? Productive, responsible citizens. That's where we all want to get when these students graduate from high school, and then help them get to their next journey, whether it be college, four-year university, part-time work, or going into the armed forces, any of those things. We just want our students in our system to be successful. And that's the most important thing a community can do for their children, is support them in education.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I agree, and I want to take a moment just to thank you all for participating. This is, as other presidents before me have said, it's much harder to be answering the questions than it is to ask. And at this time, I'd like to ask you all to make your closing statements. We'll try to keep them to about 1.5 minutes. And then the order of that will be Ms. Zorc, Mr. Barefoot, and Dr. Jones. So Ms. Zorc, your closing statements, please.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. Thank you to the taxpayers for hosting this very important forum. I truly do appreciate it. It's been my honor to serve as your school board member in District 3. On August 18th, I am asking for your vote because I want to finish the work I started. I spent my first 3 years on the board challenging status quo, questioning the budget, and bringing about the needed changes in leadership to put us on the successful path where we are with my current board members. I made bold, tough decisions with my board members for the best interest of our students. When we're dealing with our kids, time is of the essence. We cannot expect to see change if we want to keep repeating the practices of the past. I'm a visionary. I have proven I will not settle for mediocrity. My personal agenda is to continue to be the voice on the board that pushes for maximizing the full potential of all our students. I want to thank you again for everyone who is tuned in tonight and your interest in the school board race. And I ask you to please check out my credentials and my initiatives at laurazorc.com. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Laura. And Mr. Barefoot.
Thank you. In my introduction, two things I failed to mention. One, I was the mayor of Indian River Shores for 5 years and created the lawsuit, which everybody may not appreciate how it came out, but we ended up with the electric utility being sold to FPL, and the result of that was about a $22 million benefit to the community. And I worked very well with the city and county and state officials to help facilitate that transaction. I also served on the board of St. Ed's for 6 years. Coming out of the financial crisis of 2008 and 9 was one of the, I'd like to think, the key people that restructured the balance sheet of that school and put it on strong footing. Obviously, I spent a lot of time in and around education. I've got a strong financial background. I've chaired audit committees of public companies, private companies. I chaired the audit committee of the hospital here prior to its joining with Cleveland Clinic. I chair the audit committee now of a bank in Boston. In fact, I spent most of the afternoon on the phone. So I think my financial skills are there. I think there's a real opportunity here. We've got a very generous community. And it's almost, it's sort of sad that the public school system is not up to the same standards as the hospital now, the theater, all the cultural events. And I think I can add value to a board. I bring a different perspective, and I think I can complement the other 4 board members should I be lucky enough to be elected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barefoot. And finally, Dr. Jones.
Thank you, Jordan. This is great. And I thank the taxpayers, all of those who are tuned in. I've been in this district many years, and I love this community, and I know this community. I understand the role of a board member, which is basically setting policy, approving budget, and then hiring, evaluating dismissal of the superintendent and school board attorney. You know, we have a millage coming up on August 18th. And the reason I bring that up again is because it's very, very important to our school district in our community. And as I said earlier, I think it's important that the community understands what we have spent this money on from 2016 to 2020 before we go forward, because even though it's an existing millage, it's really tough times out there. We're moving into a new normal, and who knows what that will look like. I watched Dr. Moore's presentation on the 3 options, you know, brick and mortar with the safety, the virtual school, and then the transitioning. And no matter what, we as parents, community need to work together so that our students are safe. It can't just be, well, they did this or we did that. Let's work on it as a team. And that's one thing I think I could bring forward with the school board. I can bring it forward to business-like meetings. I can bring it forward to Robert's Rules of Orders being followed. I can bring it forward to consensus building, even though when it's a 3-2 vote, we move forward with that 3-2 vote and we don't keep talking about it. I am the candidate who can work with the board members to move us forward. I'm the candidate who's always been there and worked hard for our students. I was at a meeting, I think it was in February, and I hadn't been able to attend luncheons or dinners or anything like that. And when I introduced myself, a couple ladies said, well, we've never seen you here before. Well, basically it's because I've been working for 42 years. I would have loved to have gone to luncheons and dinner parties, believe me. But during that time, I was at a band competition or on the football field or keeping safe 2,000 students at a high school. I have shown my commitment to this district. I have shown my commitment to the administrators, to the teachers, to the parents, and to the taxpayers. I worked hard each and every day. And as I said,
I'm sorry. This is what I keep it. We got the timer going off, but thank you very much for your closing comments.
Thank you.
And I thank you all for participating this evening. I think this was, I hope this was a great forum. I believe everybody was able to tune in, hopefully live on our YouTube stream. We will be posting this to our website in the very near future and distributing it to our membership via email as well. I remind everyone to tune in tomorrow to the same YouTube channel as we host the forum for County Commission. Thank you again. I think I'll go ahead and sign off, but I really do appreciate everyone's participation.
Thank you, Jordan.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, everyone.